Hey everybody, tacticangel here, back on the PlayStation 4, looking at some World of Warships Legends. Today, back for another premium ship review. This time, it is the Tier 7 American battleship, USS Alabama. As usual with all of my reviews, we're going to first start with some history, then we're going to move into analysis, follow that with some stats, and then finish off with a bit of gameplay. For those of you who'd like to skip some of these sections, I have left an index down in the description. And with that out of the way, let's just jump right into it. The USS Alabama was the fourth and final South Dakota class battleship made by the United States Navy. The South Dakota class does not appear in World of Warships Legends, but its development sits between the earlier North Carolina class and the Iowa class battleship that sits at Tier 7 in Legends. For a little context, the North Carolina class was the first class of battleship built after the standard class battleships, which were more or less designed with similar operating speeds and to some degree similar armaments. You can kind of notice that when you're playing through the game, the way that all of the American battleships from Tier 3 through Tier 6 have a top speed in the low 20s. That is by design. The North Carolinas were intended to be the first fast battleships, and were a good test bed, though like any new product, they did have some initial mechanical issues, and ultimately the US Navy wanted to improve on the North Carolina's survivability, which they were a bit worried about. South Dakota class battleships learned from the North Carolinas. They were also designed with the intention of staying within the Washington Naval Treaty, and you can instantly note the way this ship looks a lot like an Iowa, but it's also very squat, very short. She is in fact even shorter than the North Carolina by about 45 feet. In spite of this, the South Dakotas did manage to make more than 27 knots, so they're still pretty fast ships. The way the South Dakotas accomplished this is largely at the expense of the comfort of the crew. Where normal battleships might have crew berths that were stacked 2 or 3 tall, enlisted men were stacked 4 high in South Dakotas in some places, and even the officers doubled up in some cabins. That said, serving aboard a South Dakota in general, and the Alabama in specific, was a pretty good deal by the end of the war. Of the 4 South Dakotas, the USS South Dakota, USS Indiana, USS Massachusetts, and USS Alabama, all 4 survived the war without sustaining much critical damage. The heaviest damage was actually probably sustained by the USS South Dakota at the Battle of Savo Island, where she was focused by the Japanese fleet. Also notable, the Indiana accidentally turned into the USS Washington during the same battle, causing a collision which would significantly damage both ships. And also kind of on the subject of survival, of the other 2 South Dakotas, both the USS Massachusetts and USS Alabama, they are both preserved to this day as museum ships. But if there was any ship that you really wanted to serve on, it was the USS Alabama, which was known to her crew as the Lucky A. BB-60 was the 5th ship to bear the name of the 22nd state. During the entirety of the war, none of her crew would die to enemy fire, though she did lose as many as 8 to friendly fire and other accidents. The Alabama herself was laid down in February 1940 and launched in February 1942. Unlike her sister ships, USS South Dakota and USS Indiana, she didn't have many opportunities to engage surface targets and spent the majority of the war performing carrier escort duty as part of the Fast Carrier Task Force, with only brief forays into shore bombardment and to give chase to retreating sections of the Japanese fleet. This wasn't to say that the Alabama didn't significantly help the war effort. On June 19, 1944, her advanced radar and diligent crew were the first to identify incoming aircraft around 50 miles before even the USS Iowa was able to confirm the same thing. The Alabama provided the fleet with enough time to ready itself versus the incoming air attack, and more critically, for US carriers to launch around 450 fighters to intercept. The ensuing battle came to be known as the Battle of the Philippine Sea in polite circles, or the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The battle would see the Imperial Navy lose 3 carriers, around 600 planes, and whatever hope remained that their carrier group had in posing a legitimate threat against the United States Navy for the remainder of the war. As for how the Alabama performs in the game, I have to say I do quite like this ship. A lot of people look at it and instantly rather assume that it's going to be a premium Iowa. There is a little bit of truth to that, but there is almost as much about the Alabama that is different and noteworthy. For those of you Iowa captains who are wondering how fast does this ship go in reverse, I suggest you stay in your current ship with your current configuration because there's really no advantage to purchasing an Alabama to try to accomplish this. The Alabama is a ship that is definitely a little bit more at home on the offense. I'm not saying that you should play this as a brawler. In fact, it's really kind of a great medium range ship where you have the confidence to advance and a little bit extra armor to actually tank some shots. But if you try to just straight up bow tank and reverse your way around the battlefield, you're going to find that this ship is not quite the sniper that its Tier 7 tech tree counterpart might be. The Alabama can be purchased from the tech tree for the price of 750,000 global XP. If you don't have 750,000 global XP, there are certain ways of getting it. And since the comparison is obvious, when we start talking about stats, I'm going to be comparing the USS Alabama to the USS Iowa. For both of these ships, I will be using the same equipment and the same commander. That is Admiral Bill Sims, who you can see on the screen here. So as we go through this, keep in mind all of the stats you're going to see are based off of that captain configuration. Like usual, we're starting with survivability, and in this case, the survivability of the Alabama is a little bit lower than what you'd expect coming from the Iowa. You lose almost 7,000 hit points versus the Iowa, and that kind of hurts you also because that reduces the amount of damage that you can heal. Not only that, the Alabama has kind of a weak heal, which is not all that surprising since the heal on the Iowa is also not crazy impressive, but it does mean that you have to be a little bit more careful with the hit points that you're given, because when you lose them, you can't really get them back as easily. The Alabama does make up some of this ground by having a little bit better armor. You see, maximum armor on this is 457 millimeters as compared to the 439 on the Iowa. And then in a truly absurd number, you have 49% torpedo reduction. This is interesting because oftentimes it's better to let somebody hit you right in the middle of the ship than take one off of the nose, because you're only going to take about half damage in the Alabama with its torpedo defense. For artillery, both of these ships are very similar. They are both sporting 3x3 406mm guns with 2 turrets in a super firing formation forward and 1 turret to the aft. The Lucky A does have around a half a kilometer less firing distance than the Iowa, but it is still a very respectable 19 kilometers. The other 2 differences between these ships are that the Alabama's turrets traverse a little bit quicker at 34 seconds rather than 37.5 for the Iowa, but her main guns do around 430 less damage per shot with AP, which I have to imagine is not a considerable difference. Both of the ships sport the same 10 double turrets with 127mm guns, which are multi-purpose, so they are also part of the anti-air suite. Which does bring us to the anti-air suite. Both of these ships are ships that if there were aircraft carriers in the game, you would not want to fly planes near. The Alabama has a very impressive AA suite, however, the Iowa does edge her out here with quite a few more Oerlikons, quite a few more Bofors, and again, the same dual-purpose 10x2 127mm guns. Now, the way I'm looking at this, it says that the Iowa technically has a higher maneuverability rating, but really the maneuverability of these 2 ships is where they probably differ the most, because the Iowa is painfully unable to turn. So while it is around 2.5 knots faster than an Alabama, the Alabama turns 210 meters tighter, and its rudder shift is Here, with the rudder shift mod, only 13 seconds. That still beats out the Iowa by more than 3 seconds. And then as we look at concealment, generally not a strong suit for battleships. I do have a slightly higher concealment rating on my Iowa, but all of the values appear the same, so I'm going to guess that we're looking at a few dozen feet extra concealment for the Iowa versus the Alabama, so functionally the same. So as we jump into some gameplay, we're going to be on Shards, a domination game. I will of course be in the beautiful Alabama, painted up in the same sort of manner that one of my other favorite ships in the game, the USS Kidd, is painted in. So we're over by sea, and kind of the reason I wanted to highlight this particular battle is because it does show some strengths and weaknesses of the Alabama. It also shows an American battleship moving forward. I know I'm giving you Iowa drivers a hard time. I also know that it's a very legitimate tactic that is born out of the obvious strengths of the ship. It's just really annoying for those of us who enjoy American battleships and actually want to, do something other than play sniper battleship. So anyway, we're moving up on sea. Obviously, you can see we're at 3/4 speed. This might be a mistake to try to work my third gun turret into play, but as you see, they're shooting HE back at me, and I managed to basically tank it all, except that I am on fire a couple of times. Now pay attention to that green section of my health. That's going to tell you the amount that I can heal, and as you see, both the left and the right side of that moving down at an equal pace, I've reached the maximum amount that I can heal, and it's really not all that much in terms of, how much can I actually heal when I use that. It's not like the Colorado. It's not a super heal. It's definitely not like a Vanguard or pretty much any other British ship. It's a little low. It's a little low, but you can make it work. And there you see sort of the familiar sort of accuracy that Tier 7 American battleship players are used to. We can land a lot of shells pretty close to the targets that we're shooting at, just like the Iowa can. It's just we don't have quite the range, and I feel like there's just a little bit less oomph on these guns. Now, unfortunately, we see an Iowa shooting at me, and this is probably going to hurt a lot, but he manages to miss. So, better lucky than good. I take my rear turret, send some hate back his way, and, we got a couple hits there, or one, whatever. And a whole bunch of nothing for the second half, it looks like. But glad we didn't use the shell follow view for that one, right? So now we're up here on the Hipper. The Hipper I do not perceive to be a particularly well-armored ship. So this offers us some opportunities. And you see as we casually rip through his hull, dealing around 5,000 damage with one shot, and then manage to sail just a whole bunch of lead past him, and unfortunately we only get just a little bit of damage there. If we can get at least one of our shells here, doesn't look like it's going to happen. But in any case, we've made it into this corner of the map, and I'm actually feeling pretty good about this because I feel comfortable operating in this amount of water. I'm not exactly in really tight passages, but I am definitely still pushing this side of the map, which is something you very rarely see Iowas doing. You've seen it a little bit more, I feel, in the last couple weeks than you have historically, and that's good, but I think that this ship, the Alabama, is actually quite a bit better at actually doing that because you do have just a little bit more armor in certain places, and you do have that torpedo protection and extra maneuverability that the Iowa just doesn't quite have. Now we do see that Iowa that was shooting at us before. We're going to see if we can't return the favor a little more. I know we did shoot at him once already, but you know, all's fair in love and war. So he is sailing nice and broadside to us. We'll go ahead and throw some shells his direction, and that should pretty much finish that. Similar to the Iowa, if you do offer broadside to your enemy, you do have the capacity of taking just a ton of damage in a very short period of time. The Alabama Citadel does sit a little high in the water compared to other battleships, just like the Iowa, so, you know, you're not particularly well armored against those sorts of threats. We follow our shells in there with the shell follow view. Do a good chunk of damage even though there's no citadels there. Once again, we can owe that to our good accuracy. And at this range, I'm not too worried, even if he was shooting AP, that he would be citadeling me, just because the unfortunateness of German AP and how it kind of dissipates quickly on range targets. In any case, that York doesn't seem to want much to do with me, and I'm just fine with that, because I want to turn back towards sea. I want to try to contest this. I want to try to contest this in a battleship. I do have, like you can see up here, a cruiser with me. For the life of me, I'm not exactly sure how much he's actually helping me, but, you know, the morale effect is nice either way. So I'm going to move up on these two cruisers. Obviously, the Baltimore is in pretty bad condition already. I imagine that might have something to do with my cruiser. And then we've got a Hipper, which is going to be a little bit more dangerous because, of course, it has those torpedoes. So, trying to keep a decent head of steam here. We want to be at least 3/4 speed because that's going to allow us to maneuver. Unfortunately, it does mean that we're limiting the amount of time that we have before maybe something bad happens to us. But I do remember vaguely saying something about the Hipper not being an incredibly well armored ship, and I feel like I've proven that. And so now we're going to go ahead and sail into sea. We see some more fire being thrown in our direction. That's fine. We're in a pretty decent position. Again, we're pretty close to the maximum amount that I can possibly heal with my my repair kit. We throw another casual 10,000 damage out there. And I like that. I find I get less citadels in this ship than I do with an Iowa, which is why I say there's a little bit less oomph on the actual shell. I apologize to my international viewers if oomph doesn't translate, but you know, this is an imprecise science. Throw another 8,000 damage onto the fire. Feeling good about this. I really enjoyed this game, even though this isn't an incredibly high scoring game. We secured a position that essentially an Iowa wouldn't have been able to do. We helped push our flank, and we made a difference in terms of making sure that we could shoot at the enemy. Now, this isn't by any stretch of the imagination the best that you can do in this, but it should give you an idea when we finish off this game just how much money you can expect to make in this ship, and, you know, is this really going to be worth it for you? It's spoiler alert, it's not a moneymaker. Now, a close range like this, the angle on my ship, I'm better off bow tanking because essentially he's able to shoot into my cheek, and you see the amount of damage that you can take in a hurry if you're at real close range like we are here. The York is kind of at the medium to far side of medium range. I'll put some shells out there. I'm not really sure how well aimed those are. Turns out they don't need to be all that well aimed. We managed to clip his bow, finish him off, and secure the victory for our team. There you see, we do 107,000 damage, which is a pretty moderate to above average game for a tier 7 battleship. We managed to finish on the top of the charts. This is a respectable score, 2694, not exactly incredible. And here we're going to look at the economics. Now, obviously, if you're considering purchasing this ship, it is a premium ship, but it does not print credits. You are still paying that tier 7 service cost. So if you have consistently good games, you can continue to play the ship. If you are the type of person who maybe likes playing the Iowa but finds that they're just a little bit unable to economically pull that off, you're going to do about 15% better on this ship, I believe. So maybe that's worth it. You can spend more time playing top tier battleships. In any case, I don't know. I like this ship. I prefer to play it over the Iowa for several reasons. One of which is my inherent aggression problem. Even though I feel like I'm really calm. I feel like I'm really chill YouTuber guy. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little review, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.